Hello everybody, Christian from Treasure Town here, and today we're going to be talking about 12 beginner to intermediate mistakes that coin collectors make. I've talked about more in-depth ones that are really pertinent to people who are coin dealers, but I wanted to kind of refresh some of my general advice for, hey, I'm starting a coin collection, what should I know? I'm interested in the world of numismatics and I want to make sure I'm not in some of the big pitfalls. And so let's follow along and I'll list off 12 that I just thought of. Number one is going to be not buying fake or restrike coins. And I think that people are probably going to be like, well, why are you even making a video telling people not to buy fake coins? But I'd say it's a lot easier than you might think. Bless her soul, my grandma turned 85 yesterday, and about 20 years ago, she was encouraging me to get into coin collecting and had found what she thought were some really exciting old coins on them at a local market and paid a couple of bucks each. And I was really excited. Wow, $17.99. But it turned out that when we looked closely, there was a little copy stamped into the back of the coin. And so that was actually not too disingenuous. It said copy right on there. But there's a lot of really fake coins that are either going to be coming from, for new collectors, you might see them on something like an Alibaba or some of the Etsy. I know eBay has a pretty good policy against them, but there are still a ton of fakes out there. Some of the insider tips would be, I remember a lot of the fakes would come from either like Russia, Cyprus, and China in terms of where they are from. So it's something to think about, but they can also certainly be sold by domestic folks. We're going to jump around here a little bit, but the next is going to be thinking that your coins are worth way more than they actually are, or way less, basically not doing the research on the coins. So if you're even watching this video, I think you're in a pretty good place, because I find one thing about the coin hobby is you can do so much learning in addition to collecting and holding the physical coins. There's just really endless research, whether it's historical, understanding values, understanding literally how coins are struck and produced. I'm thinking on that front of doubled dies, which are things that we can look for and in pocket change and see if they're worth a lot more. I used to think that I had a ton of these super, super rare errors or varieties, and it turned out that I really was just seeing things on the coins. And so I've made a lot of videos to help educate folks there. But there's also times where I've thought that I had, there was like a really esoteric coin that had some label of like Chinese coin 1927. I did so much research on it, and I thought that it was this really prized coin. Maybe nobody had any examples of them, and it ultimately, it's maybe worth I haven't found anybody who'd pay $10 for it. So that process ended up being very educational for me, but I would say that there's also kind of some issues, and maybe we'll make this an impromptu number 3 around cleaned coins. So it's really easy to say, oh, this coin's shiny. Well, that means that its value is going to be what I see a PCGS graded MS65 Morgan dollar for. Actually, it's, maybe it's XF, but it's been really rubbed and cleaned, and the shiny metal underneath the surfaces have been messed with is staring right back at you. And you're thinking, wow, I've got, this is shiny, it must be worth a ton. And while our human primitive minds might say, hey, it's great, it's a shiny piece of silver, unfortunately, those can really, it's a big difference in terms of what you think you might have if a coin is not graded versus what it might be if it is graded and it's already in a holder. And so that kind of brings me to number 4, which is not to clean coins. If you're a beginner or intermediate collector, it's really not advised that you would do much cleaning. I know some people who make a living cleaning coins really well. They can mess with the surfaces. It may not even be that ethical, but I actually think that if somebody's doing it in an acceptable way, look, you can send your coins in to NGC, and expert numismatists are going to be able to do conservation services on it, remove something like PVC. They're not going to hurt the surfaces that are underlying in the coins, but these are real trained professionals. There's a lot of solutions online, and people have ruined value of coins where it would have been that mint state 65 key date in a holder, but instead it's uncirculated details and the value falls 95%. There are others where you might be luckier and a coin that's already circulated, cleaning it isn't going to really mess with the value, but it's not a gamble that I'd recommend any beginner or intermediate collector take. Number 5 is not making any connections with your local dealing community. It's probably going to be in the form of, hey, it's fun to stop in a coin shop and talk to the owner. I'll give a little caveat that some owners are not always going to be that friendly. And I would say, as somebody who does some dealing, some collecting, it really can depend on the day. If a dealer is, they're trying to pay rent and pay the bills. And so there's often times where they don't really have the ability to go super deep with a collector and talk to them for 2 hours, but they're going to be pleasant. And if you're a customer, they're obviously going to be much more incentivized to, to serve you if that's what they do. But again, I don't want it to ruin a collecting experience for anybody if they, go in, and some dealers really are pretty focused just dealer to dealer transacting as opposed to focused on the public. So that could maybe extend to some of your local coin shows, or could extend to some of your national coin shows. Why not go check out a new city, Oklahoma City or Pittsburgh or Chicago? There's so many different places and a lot of smaller shows around where you can find a bunch of different dealers all in the same space. So if your local inventory isn't that strong, you might be able to find one at a bigger show or on something. And this is now, I guess it is a plug for my whatnot, but there's a lot of online coin communities where they're selling coins and talking to people and learning about coins. I've enjoyed that auction platform. There's eBay Live. There's a lot of different places that you can go and do that, but a lot of great forums as well. So coin collecting, way more fun when enjoyed alongside other hobbyists. Number 6, I'm going to call it taking a nuanced approach to dealing with clean coins. So I would say, on one hand, it's important to understand that vast majority of time cleaning a coin, those clean coins are going to have less value. So you want to be careful. Generally in US coins, there's not tons, unless it's in a real old collection, of coins that are super valuable that haven't been graded. Because if a dealer has a coin, unless they're really good at grading it, and I'm not talking about like gold where there might not even be that much of a premium, but if it's some really nice looking coin from the early 1800s and it's not in a holder, it could have been whizzed, it could have been a little bit tooled or, basically altered along the way. And so it's kind of a trap coin. There's a question, why is this coin not in a holder? Maybe it's even outright fake, or it's altered date, something like that. On 1943s, there's a lot of 1944 copper pennies where they've, etched around the 3. I've seen some incredible examples where a hold coin is totally restored and people re-engrave elements of a face, say you have like here's the bust and there's like a hole at the top and it says Liberty, and somebody's put back the I and the B and then like a good bit of the hair. People can really do some interesting things with coins. So again, on one hand, you want to be really careful to know, there are trap coins, there's issues with cleaned items. On the other hand, I also don't want to ruin clean coins for people, if that makes sense. I'm thinking specifically with like lower value coins. And in the world coin community, there's less of a focus on grading because there's probably not the large enough market to support that liquidity, and it just hasn't caught and gained traction the same way that it has in the States. But as a result of that, there's a lot of foreign coins that are cleaned. I've sold many of them, and so it's not like a cleaning is gonna totally take away the joy out of collecting an item, but it's just important to kind of understand, okay, if I'm gonna not want clean coins in my collection, I'm gonna have to go out and pay a much higher premium for them. Though in turn, just generally speaking, random tip, in general, unless there's some major market movement, and that will bring me to point number 7, it's often going to be that higher value coins retain their value a little bit more. Like if you could have one $1,000 coin or $1,001 coins, if you're only thinking about the resale value, probably better, and I'm sure there's a lot of edge cases that you could bring up that would contradict this, but probably better to stick with the $1,000 coin, both in terms of how much effort it would take to sell, but also the relative rarity. It's probably something that's rare. Those are a little more likely to increase over time, but again, and not investment advice or anything like that, just as generally speaking. Okay, I'm kind of embarrassed because I can't remember what number 7 was, and I was really excited to talk about it. If you comment down below if you can guess what I think I was going to say, and maybe I'll make a standalone video. But a quick one to call out is that it's generally challenging, and people don't think about this, but to sell coins at the same price that you paid for them, super quickly with minimal effort. So it's just something that you want to think about with your collection. If you are going to buy, and this is tangentially related, like 1,000 $1 coins, and maybe I have something for number 8 now, but 1,000 $1 coins, that takes a ton of effort to sell. And that is going to, in turn, like the liquidity is going to drag on the value. So if you have a bunch of $1 items, it takes 1,000 efforts. It's not just like anybody can go and sell them. And so when you think, okay, is this going to end up getting sold back to a dealer is going to pay probably a lot less on a per coin basis for the smaller dollar ones. They might pay 20% of value. If something's worth $10 retail, and a catalog says it's worth $25, but really it's $10 retail in terms of what they can quickly get for it. Challenging for them to want to pay too much more than $1 or $2 unless there's some silver component or precious metal component, because they're going to have to probably put $4 or $5 of effort into selling it. So another thing that I do think about. Number 8 is going to be watch out for what reference values you're using. So on eBay, I've even noticed this. If I have best offer on, if you should know about this. You can go to eBay and click sold listings on the left-hand side, and that's a pretty easy way to look for comparable prior sales. You can also do that with some of the coin archives for world and ancient coins and heritage auctions. There's a lot of auction records. PCGS Price Guide often has some past examples of auction records, and so that's just something to think about. A lot of the, if I go to NGC, World has great resources for world coins, but often the price guide can be either low or high on the specific coin that I'm, looking to transact. So I think that in terms of figuring out what the value of things are, US coins are a little easier to value because there's a lot of those price transactions. A lot of them are graded, so you can say, oh, this is a Mint State 62 Morgan from this year and this mint. It's a little different when you're dealing with a world coin that's not extremely rare, but there's fairly few of them available on eBay. That's definitely something that I'd think about. Number 9 is getting fooled by basement slabs. So the way that it works, there's PCGS, NGC, and CAC. And I was even talking to a lot of dealers, and they're still figuring this one out. But those are probably the 3 main grading services, though I think it's generally accepted that CAC and PCGS are going to be tougher on coins than NGC is for US ones. Now that is not always the case, but if you look at generally how things are trading and recent price examples, there's a lot more gray area now that CAC has entered the market, and people are still trying to figure all this out. That's a little bit less what I'm talking about. There's also reputable ones, ANAX, ICG I would say is medium tier, but those 5 are what you can sell on eBay. Then there's a lot of basement slabs, so AACGS, or there's a lot of just different SEGS. There's a lot of different grading services that have popped up over the years. They might have respected numismatists, but the premiums are totally different based on what grading service you're using. So I've seen on, iSell and whatnot, but I've seen a lot of sellers selling a bunch of coins in an ICG holder that really don't have the premiums accepted for the ICG, whereas, PCGS or NGC ones command a certain price. And that's just kind of how it is. And people can argue, well, this modern bullion coin, does it matter if it's proof 70 and a ICG versus a PCGS? Unfortunately, it kind of does. And I'm generally, even though more talking about a disparity between certain services are going to be tougher on gold coins, whereas if you have one of these off-brand holders with a gold coin, there's a good chance it's been altered. There's a good chance there's some big dig into it, or it's at minimum cleaned. But it might have a straight grade of Mint State 63. You have a $500 of melt value gold coin that is trading in Mint State 62 for $2,000 if it's PCGS. But if it's SEGS, it might be way lower. And again, there's a lot of coin by coin. You can also kind of ignore what's on the holders and just look at the coins, but just talking as a general thing, not to get too caught up with, hey, every grading service is the same. It's worth doing the due diligence. That's going to bring me to number 10. If something's way too good to be true, it probably is. I speak as somebody who's a very active collector and dealer, vest pocket, looking out for coins constantly online. If there's good opportunities, there's a lot of knowledgeable dealers and there's a lot of knowledgeable serious collectors that are very likely to spring on something. So if I post, we have 2,000 plus coins on eBay, if I post something for 20% less than the coin is worth, it's going to be gone overnight. And I've realized it. People are constantly scouring the internet, and if there's a grab bag that promises incredible riches, or if there's basically just schemes, if there's raw American coins being offered at some auction house and they're selling for what seems like an incredible price, but they're being compared to, this person says, oh, it's mint state 63. Well, you would have sent it in to get a grade at mint state 63. That just happened. And I'm sure if you follow my videos, you'll see to me recently, but just something to keep a lookout for. Number 11 is pretty simple. I'd watch out how you store your coins / touch them. So if you have coins that are nice and uncirculated, they shouldn't be like in a bag, rattling around, constantly smashing into each other. If you have coins, I remember once was, going through somebody's estate, it was in a basement, and they had all these coins in massive humidity, and there was mold all over the coins. It really spread, and it did damage the value, unfortunately, of those items by quite a bit. So definitely something that you want to be careful about. And just think about how you're storing coins. Don't have to go crazy overboard. There's certain flips too, like I use guardhouse 2x2s. Some people would say use a safe flip, SAFLIP. Those are maybe even a little bit better. But then there's also these like PVC flips that they will really get this green haze to them. And I think that those are generally being phased out, but all to say, you do want to think about how you're storing your coins. Probably is a subject of another video. And number 12 is going to be basically, I generally say collect with a purpose in mind, but that purpose can just be fun. It's a little bit nuanced, but I wouldn't go too crazy with your collecting. On the other hand, I wouldn't be so restrictive that you're never purchasing any coins. So I think a good way to do it is if you like a coin and it's pretty cheap for whatever your budget is, no reason not to buy it. But if you're thinking, oh, this is really, the value component and having these increase in value over time, it's tough to really say everything's going to be increasing in value over time at a collector level. I find for most people who would like own a business within coins, their thought is, hey, I just want to make as many sales quickly, 10%, 20%, quick buying and selling things off as possible. And so, something where I don't want to take any fun out of the hobby, because that's the most important thing, is having fun with this hobby. But there's going to be a balance where it's a good idea to go out and buy, have a collection, have things that you can enjoy and show other people and have in front of you. But then also if you think, hey, I do want to end up collecting a set of every ancient Roman emperor, that's going to take some detailed thinking. As a bonus tip, I generally wouldn't buy, if you're doing some kind of completion set, the very worst coins, like a super horrible coin, unless that's your budget, and that is fair. It's probably better to save up over time and get really nice, good eye appeal coins, as opposed to rushing and saying, okay, I'm going to get, this incredibly beat up, it's for my US coin typeset, bust $50, and it's got a big hole in it, and it's a total, really tough shape, and I'm paying $40 for it. But then there's probably going to be a time where you're looking at your collection as it evolves over time, and why not buy like a nice looking VF, problem free, or maybe it has old cleaning but it's retoned reasonably well and it has a nice patina. Those are some of the kind of things where I'd consider, okay, maybe it's always good to slow down and buy nice eye appeal coins in a framework or with a strategy that you're excited. So those are 12 beginner tips, traps, and things to avoid. I hope that those were helpful. If there's any you want me to make a video on that I talked about or that maybe I forgot, would also be super interested. But anyways, really looking forward to seeing you in some future videos. I have some coin interviews coming up that I'm really excited about. And so hopefully those will be fun to post and make. I haven't made them yet, but I've got all the stuff ready for it.
Thanks for watching the video. Make sure to head on over to treasuretown.com and sign up for our email list to stay up to date on everything that's happening, whether it's auction updates, exciting new inventory drops, coin collecting news, or general informational resources. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on another one.